I've spent many years observing how people behave with money, not the ultra-rich you see in headlines, but very ordinary people, students, employees, people who've just started earning an income. And here's what's interesting. Most money problems don't actually start with how much people make. They start with how people think when money passes through their hands. Most people believe, if I just made more money, everything would be fine. But I noticed something very different. A lot of people do make more money. And yet the feeling of not having enough never really goes away. And the reason comes down to a very small, very familiar habit that almost no one pays attention to. Main idea 1. The brain doesn't feel small spending. I realized that the human brain is very bad at sensing slow leaks. If you lose a large amount of money, you feel it immediately. But if you lose many small amounts, the brain barely reacts. Most people don't realize this. Their brain doesn't register money as a total. It registers money based on how it feels at the moment of spending. Small purchases usually come with thoughts like, it's fine. Just this once. It's not that much. And because those emotions are so mild, the brain never triggers a warning signal. I've heard many people say, I don't really spend that much. But when they look back, they genuinely can't remember where the money went. Not because they're lying, but because their brain never stored that memory in the first place. This is where it becomes dangerous. When the brain doesn't feel pain, it assumes everything is fine. Money keeps leaving. Emotionally, everything feels calm. Until one day, the balance drops sharply. Only then does the brain react, but by that point, it's already too late. And that's how many people fall into the same loop. Worry at the end of the month, forget at the beginning of the next. Then ask again, where did my money go? I noticed a very clear difference. People who manage money well don't have better memory. They just do one simple thing. They force their brain to see money leaving, not to control themselves, not to shame themselves, but to move money from a vague, invisible zone into conscious awareness. Once money is visible, emotions change behavior, decisions change, not because they're more disciplined, but because their brain is no longer blind. This is where many people misunderstand money management. A lot of people think, to manage money well, I need more willpower. But what I've learned is this. The more you rely on willpower, the more likely you are to fail. People who manage money well aren't always calm, disciplined, or perfectly rational. They simply don't allow their brain to exist in a state of not knowing what's happening. And once you can see clearly, you don't need to force yourself. Main idea 2. Most people fail with money because they rely on willpower instead of structure. I noticed something paradoxical. The people who often say, I have no discipline, I'm bad at self-control, I wish I were tougher on myself, are usually the ones putting themselves in too many situations where they have to decide. They constantly ask, should I buy this? Should I spend this? Should I save this? Or should I allow myself a little this time? And most people don't realize this. Every one of those questions drains mental energy. The brain hates making constant decisions. The human brain isn't designed to make dozens of financial decisions every day. When it has to decide too often, it gets tired, thinking quality drops, and eventually, it chooses the easiest option. The easiest option is usually, whatever, it's fine. I've seen this pattern many times. Motivated in the morning, hesitant by midday, completely giving up by night, not because they're weak, but because their brain battery is empty. Here's the interesting part. People who manage money well rarely self-control. They don't overthink. They don't argue with themselves. They do something very different. They remove the question entirely. For example, some money is simply off limits. Some money is free to spend without thinking, and some money is only used under very clear conditions. Once boundaries are clear, the brain doesn't need to negotiate. No inner conflict, no back and forth, no exhaustion. I realize this. Structure always beats willpower. Willpower works only when you're rested, you're calm, you're not under pressure. But structure works when you're tired, when you're busy, when you don't want to think. That's why people who look very disciplined are often just people who don't have to rely on willpower as much. They're not stronger. They're better at arranging their environment. This is where many people misunderstand financial freedom. They think freedom means I can do whatever I want with my money. But what I've realized is this. True freedom is not having to think about money all the time. And to get there, you can't rely on emotions. You need structure. Good structure reduces mental fatigue, reduces bad decisions, reduces guilt after spending. And that's when money starts to become quiet in your head. Main idea 3. Feeling broke isn't about how much you have. It's about how unpredictable money feels. I noticed something strange when listening to people talk about money. Some people earn very little, yet rarely complain about feeling broke. Others earn much more, but live in a constant state of tension. And that led me to this realization. The feeling of being broke isn't proportional to income. It's proportional to how predictable your money feels. The brain fears uncertainty more than scarcity. When you don't know how much you'll have at the end of the month, what might come up next week, how a small emergency would affect you, the brain automatically goes into defense mode. Even if the money is technically enough, it keeps whispering, "What if something happens?" And when the brain is defensive, every money decision feels stressful. You start hesitating to spend, but spending anyway, feeling guilty afterward, then worrying all over again. I realized this. Anxiety doesn't come from being poor. It comes from not seeing the road. Many people don't have a money problem. They have a short-sight problem. Money comes in, money goes out, but there's no overall picture. It's like driving in fog. The car is moving, the tank isn't empty, but you can't see what's ahead. And in fog, the brain always overreacts. People who are calm with money share one thing. They don't track every dollar, but they always see a few steps ahead. They know which expenses are fixed, which are flexible, and where they would adjust if something unexpected happened. That alone is enough to calm the brain. Not because they have more money, but because nothing feels like a sudden attack. Here's an uncomfortable truth. Many people think, if I had more money, I'd stop worrying. But without predictability, more money often just means bigger worries, heavier responsibilities, higher pressure. On the other hand, when you can see ahead, even with limited money, the brain allows you to breathe. This is when money changes roles. Money stops being a daily source of stress. It becomes a system, a predictable flow, a stable base for other life decisions. And this doesn't require wealth. It requires clarity. Main idea 4. Money doesn't listen to "I'll save what's left at the end of the month." I noticed a very common habit. Many people say, "I'll save whatever is left at the end of the month." It sounds reasonable, but in reality, it almost never works. What's interesting is this. Money is very good at finding places to go, but very bad at stopping on its own. The brain follows a quiet rule. When the brain sees unused money, it assumes that's still available. Not because you're irresponsible, not because you lack awareness, but because the brain wants to reduce current stress to trade money for immediate comfort. So money expands to fit lifestyle, while lifestyle rarely shrinks to fit money. I realized this. Money doesn't wait to be saved. It has to be held back. The people I saw successfully saving weren't more well-intentioned. They did one thing differently. They kept money aside immediately. They didn't wait for the end of the month. They didn't check what was left. The moment money arrived, part of it was already out of reach. And something strange happened. The brain adapted quickly, lifestyle adjusted automatically, and the feeling of lack never appeared. This sounds backwards, but it's very real. Many people fear, if I save first, I'll feel deprived. But what I've seen is the opposite. Not saving first is what creates deprivation. Because when you don't hold money back, you teach your brain, this money is spendable. And once the brain learns that, it's very hard to convince it to stop. Money works like air in a room. In a big room, air spreads everywhere. In a small room, there's still enough to breathe. Money is the same. The issue isn't how much you have, it's how much you allow yourself to spend. And whatever is held back early becomes the foundation for future peace of mind. Main idea 5. Debt doesn't make you poor immediately. It takes away your flexibility. I realized that many people misunderstand debt from the start. They see debt as numbers, how much they pay monthly, what the interest rate is, whether they can handle it right now. But the biggest impact of debt isn't the math. It's the feeling of being locked into the future. Debt creates invisible pressure on every decision. When you're in debt, part of your mental energy is always reserved for one thought: will next month be okay? That thought isn't loud. It sits quietly in the background, but it makes you. Avoid trying new things. Choose safe options over better ones. Fear reasonable risks. I've seen many people afraid to change jobs, afraid to learn new skills, afraid to rest when they should. Not because they lack ambition, but because their future cash flow is already promised. The danger isn't debt itself. It's the type of debt, some debt. Doesn't build skills, doesn't expand opportunities, doesn't increase earning power, but it eats away flexibility, lasts for years, forces you into a fixed rhythm of life. I realize this. This kind of debt doesn't destroy you quickly. It slows you down quietly. The brain reacts badly to having no backup option. When there's no plan B, the brain becomes more tense, more defensive, more short-term focused, and short-term decisions are rarely good for long-term money. That's how a small debt slowly expands its influence over your entire financial life. I noticed a pattern among people who use debt carefully. They don't ask, "Can I afford this?" They ask, "Will this create more options for me in the future?" If the answer is no, they calmly walk away, not because they don't want it, but because they understand this. Future freedom is always more expensive than present comfort. Main idea. 6. Comparison doesn't make you spend more. It makes you spend at the wrong time. I've realized that most bad money decisions don't happen when someone is happy. They happen when they're looking sideways at other people. Most people don't notice this. Comparison doesn't make you buy what you need. It makes you buy what helps you feel like you're not falling behind. Comparison isn't logical. Nobody sits down and thinks, "They have this, so I need it too." It's way more subtle than that. You see an image, a story, a lifestyle that's presented in a clean, simple way, and then a small feeling shows up in your head. Maybe I'm behind. It's not dramatic, but it's enough to tilt your decisions. I've noticed this. Money gets spent wrong, more from anxiety than desire. A lot of purchases look like treating yourself, but underneath, it's really fear of being judged, fear of being less than fear that you chose the wrong path. When money is used to calm that emotion, it rarely creates lasting satisfaction. You might feel good for a moment, but the insecurity is still there. Here's what's interesting. The people who move fastest are usually the ones nobody notices. I've observed a certain kind of person that's almost surprising. They don't spend the least, but they spend at the right times. They're not rushing to prove anything. They don't need to match the crowd's rhythm, so their money gets used to. Build a foundation, buy time, create more options, not to protect an image. Comparison pushes you to spend before you're ready. This is the most important part. Comparison pushes you to buy earlier, spend before your stable trade. Real stability for the feeling of not being left behind. And I've realized a lot of financial pressure comes from moving faster than your capacity can handle. Living below your means isn't living small. It's just living out of sync with the crowd, slower on the surface, but faster where it actually matters, the foundation. And once the foundation is strong enough, you don't have to run anymore. Things start opening up on their own. Main idea 7. Delaying isn't about saving. It's about filtering out what you don't actually need. I've realized that a lot of spending doesn't come from real need. It comes from urgency, not because the thing is truly important, but because your emotion in that moment says, "I need this right now." And what's interesting is that right now feeling usually doesn't last. The brain is great at exaggerating the present. When a buying impulse shows up, your brain zooms in on it. You start thinking, if I don't buy it now, I'll regret it. If I don't have it, I'll be missing something. If I pass, I'm basically losing. But I've realized that's your brain speaking for emotion, not logic. Emotion lives in the present. Delaying isn't about forcing yourself. It's about changing who makes the decision. When you delay for 24 to 48 hours, you're not doing anything complicated. You're doing one simple thing. Letting tomorrow you decide. Tomorrow you is. Less hyped, under less pressure, able to see the situation from farther away. And a lot of things, when you look at them from a distance, just stop feeling important. A light but powerful truth. People who handle money well aren't people who never want to buy anything. They're just really good at letting the craving dissolve on its own. No banning, no self-blame, no inner battle. Just not rushing. Delaying exposes fake needs. After a few days, you'll notice Some things you completely forgot. You even wanted some things you feel relieved you didn't buy, and some things that are still there, very clear. The ones that remain, those are the ones worth spending on. And I've realized money usually isn't lost because you bought the wrong thing. It's lost because you bought too early. When you stop rushing, money starts to behave, not because you suddenly gained more control, but because you stopped letting emotions set the spending tempo. And when the tempo slows down, your brain has time to think. Your money has time to stay. Main idea 8. Peace with money doesn't come from having a lot. It comes from feeling in control. I've noticed something really interesting talking to people. Some people don't have big balances, but they sleep great. Others always have money in their hands, but their mind never truly rests. And that made me realize money doesn't create peace. The feeling of control creates peace. The brain needs the feeling of I'm not being pulled around. When money comes and goes, and you don't really understand why, your brain feels like things are just happening. I'm not in the driver's seat. That's dangerous. It makes you anxious, more easily overreact, more easily spend money to calm emotions, not because you're lacking money, but because you don't feel like you're driving. Control doesn't mean being tight or obsessive. A lot of people think control means tracking every dollar, analyzing every purchase, restricting yourself constantly. But the people who are calm with money do the opposite. They just need to know where their money is, where it's going next, how much room they have to adjust. That's it. When you feel in control, behavior changes naturally. It's strange, but it's real. When you know you have a way out, you spend more slowly, not out of fear, but because you don't have to rush. When you know you're on the right track, you don't need to prove it through spending. I've seen so many people, once they feel okay, they naturally spend less, make clearer decisions, stop feeling random financial tension. Money starts doing its actual job. It stops being something you obsess over, daily worry about at night, beat yourself up over. It becomes a tool, a foundation, something steady in the background, instead of constantly pushing to the front of your mind. And this doesn't require a lot of money. It requires the feeling that you're holding the steering wheel. Main idea 9. The most powerful quiet wealth isn't money, it's rhythm. I've realized something most people never pay attention to. When people talk about money, they usually talk about amounts. How much is enough? How much is safe? How much means you're okay? But the people who go far financially talk to me about rhythm. They don't ask, how much do I have? They ask, what rhythm is my money moving in? The wrong rhythm makes money feel exhausting before it's even gone. Some people earn in bursts, spend emotionally, save only when they still have energy. That rhythm is unstable. When they have money, they relax. When they don't, they panic. And their mood rises and falls with their balance. And I've realized that up and down is what drains people, not just the lack of money. People who manage money well have a steady rhythm. They don't get rich overnight. They don't spend aggressively. Their rhythm is, income comes in consistently, money gets held back consistently, spending has a structure, not perfect, but stable. And stability creates something extremely important, trust in yourself. When you trust your rhythm, you stop panicking. I see this clearly. People with a stable rhythm don't freak out over small problems, don't rush at opportunities, don't speed up just because others are running, because they know, I'm moving steadily. And steady always wins long-term over fast and then stopping. This is very different from how most people think. A lot of people believe, later I'll get serious. But money doesn't respond to later. Money responds to what you can repeat, not what you do when you're motivated. What you do on a normal day. Sustainable wealth is really a stable life rhythm. When your money rhythm is steady, your life rhythm follows. You don't need to check your account, constantly worry every time you spend, punish yourself over small decisions. Money blends into your life instead of controlling it. Main idea 10. Real wealth starts when money stops taking up space in your head. After years of watching this, I've noticed a very clear sign. Not everyone who has more money has a lighter mind, but anyone who has a lighter mind about money sooner or later goes very far. When money stays in your head, it wears you out. A lot of people wake up every morning thinking, will this month be okay? Did I overspend? Should I buy this? Or should I wait? These thoughts aren't loud, but they take up space all day. And when money takes up space in your head, you lose focus, get irritated more easily, make worse decisions, not because you're weak, but because your mind is overloaded. People with wealthy behavior are people who free up mental space. The people I've seen do well financially aren't always thinking about money. Actually, they think about it less, not because they don't care, but because their money is in the right place. When structure is clear, when rhythm is steady, when decisions aren't happening in constant small moments, money steps back from the mind. And suddenly your brain has space for learning, creating, building real value, seeing further than just the next few months. Wealth isn't having endless options. It's not being forced to choose. This might be the deepest thing I've learned. Poor money psychology is living in reaction mode, reacting to bills, reacting to invites, reacting to outside pressure. Wealthy behavior is moving slower on purpose. You're not forced into decisions. You're not backed into a corner. You have a buffer, financially and mentally. That's when money starts serving you, not the other way around. At that point, money doesn't need constant checking, doesn't need proving to anyone, doesn't need to be used to calm emotions. It just sits there, quiet, stable. And that quiet stability is the real foundation of lasting wealth. If you see yourself in what I just said, remember this. Wealth doesn't start with a number. It starts with how you organize money so your mind can rest. And if this video helped you see money more clearly, feel calmer, and feel a little lighter in your head, hit like and subscribe to the channel so we can keep talking about money psychology and wealthy behavior in a slow, practical, non-flashy way.